Okay, thank you for your attention. Before we start, I would like to know who we have in the crowd. Could you please raise both hands if you are from local government? Raise please 2 hands if you're from national government. That's 1, 2. Okay. Do we have United Nations employees? Okay. Yes, more. And how about NGOs? Oh, that's a lot of NGOs. Okay. Now I know a bit about our audience. We're going to talk about inclusive blue-green infrastructure in cities. We have a nice image here. Looks a bit complicated. Looks like it's been a lot of work. It has been. We'll come back to that later. First of all, I'm from Wetlands International. We are a global not-for-profit organization. Our global office is in the Netherlands, and we have, let's see, a lot of offices in the world. It depends on the amount of projects that we get more or sometimes even less. We're the only organization dedicated purely to the restoration and conservation of wetlands. And we do this for people and nature, for the benefits of both. We work through a lot of partnerships. You see the Partners for Resilience. The Philippines just had a presentation on Partners for Resilience here. We are a member of the Global Resilience Partnership. We're working on water as leverage for resilient cities in Asia. Global Mangrove Alliance, PEDR. We have a booth of PEDR here around the corner. And we're in the EcoShape consortium that promotes building with nature. So we have 20 offices. We work on the interface between policy, practice, and knowledge. Was highlighted a bit in the following slides. So we're talking about blue-green infrastructure. So what are the differences? Let's have a look at that first. Is it the same? Is it different? What are the differences? Let's go first with grey infrastructure. The formatting of this PowerPoint presentation is a bit different. Excuse me for that. They are traditional human-engineered measures. So, can be single measures with very singular or purposes and services. So, for example, a seawall has one service of protecting the coast, and you might put a road on top of it. Then it has 2 services it provides. Compared to ecosystems, that's not much. Green infrastructure is a planned network of different types of natural and semi-natural areas with environmental features that provide a lot of services. And according to the EU Commission definition, now we're looking at blue-green infrastructure. It's similar to the green infrastructure, but it has a lot of water bodies and open spaces around it, and also the focus is important once again on that network. So no singular measures, but a network of measures. This is an example of, well, bad grey infrastructure, as you can see. This was a coastal protection measure in the Guianas. It has collapsed. It could not adapt to the changing circumstances, changing sea level, and also the removal of mangrove and another ecosystem surrounding it. So it collapsed. This is an example. This is a bioswale. You see that it is a network because the water that flows in will be absorbed and integrated, infiltrating into the soil. But you see no open water bodies. Now, this is an example of how we, as Wetlands International, would like to see Panama City to become. You see clearly there's a network of different green and blue areas. So this is clearly blue-green infrastructure, and it will provide many different services, not only flood protection, also recreation, also biodiversity, habitat, and many more. So the question is of this presentation, how do we get an inclusive approach to developing these types of blue-green infrastructure measures? We have an example from Panama City. The problem there is, but there was a recurring flooding problem, especially in the Juan Diaz sub-district of Panama City. There, that made it actually the #1 of the entire Latin America on the local disaster index. So the small local disasters recurring every year, multiple times per year, with a big thunderstorm and high tides combined, they will cause a lot of flood problems. The cause, of course, Juan Diaz is in a lower part of the river basin, but there were a lot of wetlands, swamps, floodplains. These got all landfilled for building a mall, building how do you call it, industry capacity for storage, and also housing projects, which made the river level go about 30 centimeters higher than before. All the water storage capacity mostly gone, and then you get a picture like this. You see, this is typical Juan Diaz when it's raining and when there's a high tide coming in from the coast. And this is actually the map. If you look closely, this is the river, the red line, and where the flood areas are, there used to be swamps. There used to be wetlands, there used to be floodplains, and these got landfilled. And those are exactly the places where the water cannot go anymore and it runs off into the neighborhood. So, what did we do? What was our inclusive approach? We invited the top water experts from the Dutch risk reduction team from the Netherlands, together with the Dutch government and the embassy. We had a good collaboration with the Inter-American Development Bank. They provided some technical assistance to do hydrological modeling and also hydraulic modeling. The problem also was that there was a blaming game going on between all the different stakeholders. So the government was blaming, well, everybody blamed the government basically. The private sector blamed the government because they said, well, we're compliant with all the rules that you give us. So it's actually not our fault. The communities, they blamed the private sector who were doing the landfilling. And the NGOs, they blamed the private sector and also the government. So what was necessary, one of the recommendations of the Dutch risk reduction team first mission was to engage stakeholder dialogues and bringing all these different sectors together to the table, which they have never done before, because they were always through the media, through protests, blaming each other. And in the follow-up missions, in the follow-up dialogue sessions, we also brought them together to look at specific parts of the watershed and do participatory design sessions. So this means, like on that right photo, you can see that's one of the developers with the nice shirt on the left. You have some Dutch experts. Next to the developer, there's a community leader whose house got flooded. And in the back, there's one of the Dutch experts, and on the right, it's Matthijs Bouw of One Architecture, who has also worked post-Sandy work in the Rebuild by Design competition in New York. There was also an issue of how do we mobilize these communities who are protesting all the time, that don't want to listen to talking, that want to see action. So, in order to convert them from opposers of any type of intervention and talking to what they see as the people that have the blame, which are the private sector and the government, we needed to show that we're not just talking in these water dialogues, we're also going into the community, clean up the drainage channels that have been blocked by all the overgrowth, the lack of maintenance. And once we did that, they recognized that we were serious, that we were in there for a longer period. Then they started actually becoming the champions of this process. So this is one of the results. Another result is that we changed the narrative. We changed the blame game into, okay, let's now look forward. We have sufficient knowledge from the hydrological modeling. We know what the causes are. So there you cannot blame any other people anymore. We know now, as a starting point, where we want to go with the solutions. The result. I have 5 minutes. I see. The results of the Panama-Dutch water dialogues was an action plan with regulatory adjustments, and also different measures that have to be constructed. So the blue-green infrastructure. Because we were collaborating with the Inter-American Development Bank, they made a loan available for $100 million to actually implement what is the image on the left, and the middle image is what the participatory design session resulted for the area of Santa Ynez. You can see it looks a lot different than that little drainage canal that you saw before. And another example for which I probably don't have time, you maybe heard it in other sessions, is the water as leverage. So a similar approach we are currently doing in Semarang, which is in Indonesia, which has a lot of water problems as well, a retreating coast due to coastal erosion, subsiding land. And together with the Dutch government, we are with the special envoy, Mr. Henk Ovink, we are looking into developing blue-gray infrastructure and working together with the MDBs to get this financed or funded by, for example, by the Green Climate Fund. There's a lot of local workshops with all the actors on board. If you were yesterday at our event yesterday night, you could hear him talk about it as well. It's important from the beginning to have all the stakeholders on board. That also means national government. It means also that you have the financiers, the people who can pay for these measures on board from the beginning, as well as the communities. Let's see. And then, as One Resilient Semarang, our design team, which consists of One Architecture as well, Wetlands International, TNC, Deltares, we come up with this coastal approach, the Integrated Protective Coastal Zone, in which we incorporate already running initiatives from the national government and the provincial government for a seawall and for landfills, and we actually try to turn these into blue-green infrastructure. So no more seawall, but a permeable wall, which water can go through. We can actually capture sediment instead of exposing it into the sea, and make sure that the sediment that was dredged, for example, in the new harbor, that we use it locally to build greener protective structures that can actually prevent erosion, can help adapt to sea level rise and other challenges that they are facing. I think my time is up. You've seen Partners for Resilience about the Philippines, so don't need to mention this. I can only mention Tacloban, which is in the Philippines, has a lot of problems with typhoons, inland flooding, coastal flooding, and we are working also with JICA. They are proposing a huge seawall to make sure that they don't create a huge bathtub instead of a protective, an adaptable coastline. So I would like to have some questions from the audience, but I think my time is up. No? Sure. If we have a question from the audience? No? Okay. Then I guess everything was clear. Thank you for your time.